Welcome back to Capital Uncovered. I'm your host, and what I'm about to tell you is going to shake you to your core. But before we dive into this financial nightmare, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because at Capital Uncovered, we're bringing you the hard truths that the mainstream financial media won't touch. And if this video saves you from making a catastrophic financial mistake, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel reach more people who need to hear this information. We're looking at a $37 trillion national debt that's growing faster than a cancer cell. But here's what the mainstream financial media won't tell you. The Treasury Department is sitting on a $750 billion gold hoard that they're officially valuing at only $11 billion. Think about that absurdity for a moment. The government owns 261 million troy ounces of gold. That's less than 1 ounce per American citizen, by the way, and they're keeping it on the books at $42.22 per ounce. Meanwhile, gold is trading above $3,300 an ounce in the real world. This isn't accounting. This is financial theatre. Now, Trump's original plan was classic political theatre, put Elon Musk in charge of something called DOGE and promised to cut $2 trillion in government spending. Anyone with half a brain could see this was doomed from the start. You don't solve a structural monetary crisis by trimming around the edges, especially when the entire political establishment depends on that spending for their survival. And surprise, surprise, it failed spectacularly. The deficit for 2025 is actually worse than the same period last year. Government overspending has accelerated, not decreased. Cutting government spending would trigger a recession because... And here's the dirty secret. Government spending is now such a massive component of GDP that removing it would collapse the economy. It's like trying to perform surgery on yourself with a rusty knife. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is where Trump's new plan comes into play. The Federal Reserve itself published a document in August exploring how other nations have raised funds through gold revaluation. 5 countries have done this in the past 30 years. Germany, Italy, Lebanon, Curacao, St. Martin, and South Africa. They did it because they were in exceptional fiscal circumstances. Well, if $37 trillion in debt and over $1 trillion a year in interest payments isn't exceptional, I don't know what is. Here's the mathematical reality that should terrify every thinking person. If the government wanted to lower the debt to GDP ratio from the current 120% down to just 110% using gold revaluation alone, they'd have to price gold at $11,000 an ounce. To get back to pre-financial crisis levels of around 60% debt to GDP, we're talking about $86,000 per ounce. These aren't typos, these are the actual numbers when you run the mathematics. But Trump's got a different angle now, and it's actually quite clever in a diabolical sort of way. The Genius Act, which Trump signed into law in July, is designed to create artificial demand for treasury bills through the cryptocurrency market. Here's how this shell game works. When people buy cryptocurrencies and convert them to stablecoins, digital representations of dollars, those stablecoins must now be backed by US dollars or short-term treasury bills. As the crypto market grows from its current $4 trillion valuation, it creates more demand for treasury bills, theoretically keeping interest rates lower. It's financial engineering at its finest, almost desperate depending on your perspective. Now, there's also talk about gold-backed treasury bonds. Not a return to the gold standard, mind you, but specific bonds where the government borrows money today and pays you back in physical gold 30 years from now. 0 coupon. Convertible to gold at maturity. This idea comes from Judy Shelton, Trump's former economic advisor, who was rejected by the Senate specifically because she advocated for gold, which threatens the Federal Reserve's monopoly on money creation. But here's the thing about gold revaluation that most people don't understand. It's completely arbitrary. The government can set the price of gold at whatever they want, $15,000, $50,000, $100,000 an ounce. They simply declare that's the price and stand ready to buy unlimited quantities at that price. It's not based on market forces, it's based on government decree. And here's the kicker. Gold revaluation doesn't require congressional approval. Trump can do this whenever he wants with the stroke of a pen. Word on the street is they're considering $15,000 per ounce, which would generate $4 trillion for the Treasury. That's $4 trillion less in Treasury bonds they'd need to sell to the public. Convenient timing, too, with America's 250th anniversary coming up on July 4th, 2026. But let's be brutally honest about what all of this really represents. Whether it's cryptocurrency demand manipulation or gold revaluation schemes, these aren't solutions to America's fundamental problem. The government has an addiction to spending money it doesn't have, and these plans are just elaborate ways to enable that addiction a little bit longer. The debt to GDP ratio tells the real story. We're at 120%, which is well above the sustainable threshold of 77% that the World Bank identified. The interest payments alone have more than doubled in just 5 years, from $500 billion to over $1 trillion annually. When your average interest rate is over 3% and climbing, and you're constantly refinancing debt that was issued at much lower rates, you're in a death spiral. Every additional dollar the government borrows now generates only 50 cents of GDP growth. We've crossed the threshold where debt actually destroys economic growth rather than creating it. Add in the demographic catastrophe of retiring baby boomers, and you've got a mathematical impossibility disguised as a policy debate. The Federal Reserve's own data shows that ever since quantitative easing was introduced, we can no longer grow our way out of debt. We're literally digging the hole deeper with every borrowing cycle. So whether Trump goes with crypto market manipulation, gold revaluation, or some combination of both, understand what you're really looking at: desperate measures by a government that has painted itself into a corner with no legitimate way out. The only real question is whether these schemes can buy enough time for you to position yourself accordingly. Because when this house of cards finally collapses, and it will collapse, the people who understood monetary history and owned real assets will be the ones left standing. The mathematics don't lie, even when the politicians do. Now, if you found this analysis valuable, please share it with someone who needs to understand what's really happening to our monetary system. Hit that like button if you want to see more deep dives into the financial engineering that's reshaping our economy, and make sure you're subscribed to Capital Uncovered with notifications turned on. Drop a comment below and let me know. Do you think Trump's gold and crypto strategies are brilliant financial engineering, or just elaborate ways to kick the can down the road? I read every single comment, and your insights often spark ideas for future videos. And remember, at Capital Uncovered, we're here to give you the unfiltered truth about money, markets, and the monetary system, because your financial future depends on understanding the game that's being played with your wealth. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, and keep your capital uncovered.